deeply into our meeting here, I just needed to say a couple things up front. Again, such a privilege to be amongst all of you. I'm kind of hoping that one thing that all of us will get out of what we're going to do today together, one of the things that I feel particularly strong about in regards to the philosophy of Theosophy, and what I've learned from all of you and what I've learned from the meetings, both at Crotona and Santa Barbara and Los Angeles and wherever Theosophists gather, that Theosophy is essentially everywhere. It's everywhere. You can't get away from it. It is not contained in a few books. It's not in a library someplace. It's not hidden in a cave in the Himalayas. It's in each one of us. It's in nature. It's in the smallest creatures. It is in the plants. It's in the sun, the moon, and the stars. And it's only our lack of receptivity that closes us out from the perpetual education that Theosophy is giving us. I think also, I wanted to make this point as well. When we're talking about renewal, when we're talking about regeneration, which is another way of saying this, the spiritual path. The spiritual path is a path of self-renewal and regeneration. It's a return to our origins. It's a return to the source. I think that's why we cherish infancy. Do you remember that Emerson said, "Infancy is the perpetual Messiah, which comes to the world of fallen men and begs for them to return to paradise." I've always loved that expression. Begs for them to return to paradise. So I think that the net result of becoming a student of Theosophy and in joining in with others in the pursuit of the ideas is one discovers that it makes one more kind. It makes one more thoughtful. It makes one more contented. And in addition to those qualities, it makes you more resilient because you have a sense of the bigger picture. So I think we'd all agree that we're living in a time when there's quite a bit of despair. I've noticed in my own circle of life, my own immediate family, neighbors, friends, associates, there's a predominance of depression that many people are experiencing. And I think that this is precisely why we need Theosophy to enter the arena. Because Theosophy, the ideas, the spirit, is redemptive and regenerative. And I think another thing that humanity at this particular junction in time is struggling with, which is so odd given how many of us there is on the planet at the moment, that there's a pervasive sense of loneliness and isolation. And as we know from the Buddha, the primary predicament of the human condition is separateness. So it's only natural that if that be true, and I think it is, that loneliness is what plagues us in so many respects. So I wanted to share one of my favorite passages from The Voice of the Silence and offer a couple thoughts about this being alone business, because I think we have to make an effort if we're going to renew ourselves, regenerate ourselves, to reconnect. We have to reconnect. So the Voice of the Silence says, "Thou shalt not separate thy being from being and the rest, but merge the ocean in the drop within the ocean. So shalt thou be in full accord with all that lives. Bear love to men as though they were thy brother pupils, disciples of one teacher, the sons of one sweet mother. Of teachers there are many. The master soul is one, Alaya, the universal soul. Live in that master as its ray in thee. Live in thy fellows as they live in it. So, one thing amongst others that could be drawn from this is that we ourselves have to make an effort to reconnect. The loneliness does not go away from the outside. It goes away from the inside out. And oddly enough, in the solitude of the voice of the silence, we discover our commonality with our fellow man and with the whole of nature and all of life for that matter. Additionally, one of the, I think, most beautiful statements about the great teachers of mankind was made by Shankaracharya. I was wondering if Elena, you wouldn't mind reading it out loud for us.
It's a good example of Jerry falling on people. Pablo, could you please mute yourself? He's mute. The great. Sorry.
It'll work out. Okay, Elena, that's okay. Laura, would you mind reading it?
Boy, here we go. Yes, this is a wonderful verse to contemplate. The great and peaceful ones live regenerating the world, having crossed the ocean of embodied existence themselves. They freely aid all others who seek to cross it. The very essence and inherent will of Mahatmas is to remove the suffering of others. Just as the ambrosia-rayed moon cools the earth, heated by the intense rays of the sun.
So it's true, if the great ones tell us the truth, that we're never alone. The aid of the Brotherhood of Mahatmas is built right into the very fabric of the universe. And the aid, whatever aid is needed for any individual to renew themselves, is available to them if they just look for it. And this passage is very interesting in, again, counterbalancing this loneliness issue I'm talking about. That in a very, very real way, each one of us has an internal guide available to us. This is really the basis, I think, of what Emerson said when he talked about self-reliance. He wasn't just talking about, reliance on the personal man, but reliance upon one's higher nature, which we're each and every one of us trying to build a bridge to facilitate deeper and deeper communication between the highest within us and the lowest within us. So the voice of the silence says, the light from the one master, the one unfading golden light of spirit, shoots its effulgent beams on the disciple from the very first. Its rays thread through the thick, dark clouds of matter. So, as we entertain this renewal idea, I think it's important for us to go back to the roots. The Theosophical philosophy is exceedingly rich and deep, but it's also exceedingly simple and straightforward. And I think sometimes we forget about that. We get deep into the terminology in the philosophy that comes from every corner of the planet and every civilization on Earth. We see the depth and sophistication of the communication coming from teachers like H.P. Blavatsky. And it's easy to lose track of the fact that actually Theosophy communicates to the little child as well as to the veteran student. So I think, just for a moment, I want to go back to the core ideas of this philosophy, which is the underlying philosophy of the universe. And because that is true, the underlying, if that be true, if we use that as a working hypothesis, then nature herself is a teacher. So the first big idea in the philosophy that one has to grasp is that there is one common source for life. There is one life. There is one spirit. There is one absolute principle that stands behind all of life. And it is present in every scintilla of life on the planet. The second idea is that life works periodically. And we have the idea of, the ancients used the term great breath, that life goes through a cycle. And that cycle has to do with an outbreathing and an inbreathing. And that is a simple way of looking at the idea that there is cycles that pervade every single element of life. In fact, a human life is a cycle. And the Earth and the solar system and the cosmos have a day and a night. And the ancients called them a manvantara and a pralaya. And this idea is the foundation of what we come to call law, the law of the universe. And that law, this periodicity, is a law of balance. It is a law of justice. It is a law of causation, from within without and from without within. And this pervades everything in nature, from the firefly to a solar system. Now, the third idea is the idea of evolution and the idea of growth and maturation and enlightenment. And this is where our little by little concept comes in, because that's how nature proceeds, little by little, incrementally. And I'm showing you these beautiful pictures of nature because all of these works of art really were established here on Earth incrementally over thousands and thousands, millions in many cases, years. And if nature be a teacher, then she's teaching in every single aspect of manifestation, all the way down to the beauty of a single flower. So this idea of nature being our teacher is epitomized in this beautiful expression from Krishna to Uddhava. I wonder if I could get Idharmas to read this out loud, please. Can you unmute and read this, please?
I'll try. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. The luster of wisdom. Learn from these facets of nature, though trampled on by all. Be firm in your adversity like the earth itself. from these mountains, which hold their mineral and other resources for the welfare of the world, learn that you must live for others and not for yourself. Like the wind, you must be able to pass through unhindered, all pervasive, touching everything, yet itself untouched. The sky is verily the shining paradigm of the yogin. You should be limpid, pure, purifying and refreshing like water, effulgent with the luster of wisdom like the fire that reduces to ashes all impurity. Like the python, lie still and take only what comes to you. And when nothing comes, fast as the python does. Like the sea, deep and unfathomable, neither be swollen by the flows into you, nor be depleted by what is withdrawn from you. Like the bee, laden little by little, and from the good and bad alike, extract the essence, even as the bee gathers honey.
Thank you. So even the bee is working little by little. So let's talk about this idea, and let's call it a mantra, if you will, because I think it will be helpful to us in every single aspect of each and every endeavor of our lives. That we're going to improve, we're going to move forward, but it's only going to happen little by little, one little step at a time. And nature mirrors this in the large and in the small. So I myself am a horticulturist. That's what I do for a living. I've been involved with it for over 45 years now. And it's been interesting to me in the study of plants, in the study of and designing gardens and things of that nature, that all of the great lessons that I've learned from Theosophy are displayed. And certainly this idea of little by little is displayed in the growth of a tree. Now, what I'd like you all to do is take your eyes off the screen just for a second. I want you to look at your hand. And on your hand, I want you to fold all your fingers down until you can see only your little finger. And then take a look at your nail on your little finger. That's the size of a Sequoia giganteum's seed, which is what you're looking at on screen here. That is a Sequoia seed. It's about the size of your little fingernail, okay? From that little tiny seed, a seedling appears, just a few inches tall, and over time, it becomes a little fledgling tree. You know, maybe this is just within the first year of its life. And over a series of years, maybe 20 or 30, might grow to be, somewhere between 50 to 80 feet tall. But these trees, which grow little by little, will become, over several thousand years, trees that are really, well, I think they're the Mahatmas of the tree world. I mean, when you go to the Sequoia National Park or Yosemite, for example, and you stand in the presence of these sequoia trees, you feel you're in the presence of an august creature and being. These trees here are probably in excess of 250 feet tall and are probably over a couple thousand years old. Now, I don't know if you can see it very well. You might have to strain to do it, but at the base of the trees is a little fence that's maybe about 3.5 feet tall. And then standing next to the fence is my wife, Diane, all 5'6" of her, dwarfed by these enormous trees. If I kind of zoom in, you can see, there she is, way down there. But how did these trees grow to be this magnificent? Well, little by little. That's the answer. So if that's good enough for nature, should be good enough for us too, right? Now there was a wonderful little story that I wanted to read to you. It's called the Daffodil Principle. And I thought it would be a nice way to show a demonstration of an individual who adopted the little by little mantra. So here it is. Several times, my daughter had telephoned to say, "Mother, you must come see the daffodils before they are over." I wanted to go, but it was a 2-hour drive from Laguna to Lake Arrowhead. "I will come next Tuesday," I promised, a little reluctantly, on her third call. Next Tuesday dawned, cold and rainy. Still, I had promised, and so I drove there. When I finally walked into Carolyn's house and hugged and greeted my grandchildren, I said, "Forget the daffodils, Carolyn. The road is invisible in the clouds and the fog. There's nothing in the world except you and these children that I want to see bad enough to drive another inch." My daughter smiled calmly and said, "We drive in this all the time, Mother." "Well, you won't get me back on the road till it clears, and then I'm heading home," I assured her. "I was hoping you'd take me over to the garage to pick up my car." "How far will we have to drive?" "Just a few blocks," Carolyn said. "I'll drive. I'm used to this." After several minutes, I had to ask, "Where are we going? This isn't the way to the garage." "We're going to my garage the long way," Carolyn smiled, "by way of the daffodils." "Carolyn," I said sternly, "please turn around." "It's all right, Mother, I promise. You'll never forgive yourself if you miss this experience." About 20 minutes, we turned into a small gravel road and saw a small church. On the far side of the church, I saw a hand-lettered sign that read, "Daffodil Garden." We got out of the car and each took a child's hand, and I followed Carolyn down the path. Then we turned a corner on the path, and I looked up and gasped. Before me lay the most glorious sight. It looked as though someone had taken a great vat of gold and poured it down the mountain peak and slopes. The flowers were planted in majestic swirling patterns, great ribbons, swaths of deep orange, white, yellow, and salmon, pink, saffron, and butter yellow. Each different colored variety was planted as a group so that it swirled and flowed like its own river with its own unique hue. There were 5 acres of flowers. "But who has done this?" I asked Carolyn. "It's just one woman," Carolyn answered. "She lives on the property. That's her home." Carolyn pointed to a well-kept A-frame home that looked small and modest in the midst of all that glory. We walked up to the house. On the patio, we saw a poster. "Answers to questions I know you're asking," was the headline. The first answer was a simple one. 50,000 bulbs, it read. The second one was, "One at a time, by one woman. 2 hands, 2 feet, very little brain." The third answer was, "Began in 1958. There it was, the daffodil principle. For me, that moment was a life-changing experience. I thought of this woman whom I had never met, who more than 40 years before had begun one bulb at a time to bring her vision of beauty and joy to an obscure mountaintop. Still, I just planted one bulb at a time, year after year, and she had changed the world. The unknown woman had forever changed the world in this way. She had created something of indescribable magnificence, beauty, and inspiration. The principle her daffodil garden taught is one of the greatest principles of celebration. That is, learning to move forward toward our goals and desires one step at a time, often just one baby step at a time, and learning to love the doing, learning to use the accumulation of time. When we multiply tiny pieces of time with small increments of daily effort, we too will find we can accomplish magnificent things. We can change the world, and we can start right now. That's the daffodil principle. Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm going to continue on, trying to hammer this point home by offering the examples of a couple of my heroes. And I want to start by having you listen to my favorite guitar player. And his name's Tommy Emmanuel. My friends know that I play his music all the time. I picked out this song because it's super fast. Because I want to make a point about it after it's over. But take a listen to what a human being can do when they practice. This is what he says. He and I share the same birth year and the same birth month. We're almost identical in age. He's only a few days younger than I am. But from the age of 10 to the age of 69, he claims to have practiced and or performed every single day of his life without a single break, 6 hours every single day. And that's what is required to be able to play this like this. Okay. So, I wanted to tell you, as a amateur guitar player and someone who's enjoyed tinkering around with the guitar for a long time, that when he talks about his training regimen to prepare to perform songs like this, it's noteworthy because it fits into our little by little theme. In fact, that's exactly how he explains his training regimen, as little by little. He actually has a whole album by that name, Little by Little. And what he does is he just takes a single bar and he will play very, very slowly the notes required and the chords required for that bar. And he'll repeat it again and again and again. And then once he gains a certain level of mastery with that one bar, then he moves to the next bar and puts in a lot of energy, getting at a slow pace, not at the rhythm that this song goes, but at a much, much slower pace. He will practice the sequence of notes and chord changes and the like. And he proceeds bar by bar by bar through the song. And he might only work on 3 or 4 bars in a given day. He says that it's he makes a point of getting far away from other people when he practices, because it's so boring and miserable to listen to someone repeat the same thing over and over and over again. But if you want to be able to play at that pace and bring all that together, and I'm showing you a song that's a contemporary song. It's not a classical piece. Something he wrote. It's called "The Hunt," and there's a little bit of showmanship in it. And he does solo performances all over the world. He does like 300 concerts a year, all over the planet. He's much beloved worldwide. He makes a point of bringing onto the stage some young person who's an up-and-coming player to play with him everywhere he goes. So he plays this role as mentor worldwide for original music and guitar playing, which is so wonderful. But this process of training himself to play is noteworthy because it exemplifies this little by little element. So, if you're going to have the daffodil, 6 acres of daffodils, it's not going to happen overnight. And looking for quick results is not how nature works. It just doesn't. So at some point, we have to be content just to take one little step at a time. And that's even true for the finest guitar players on the planet. By the way, I would assume there may be the number of people that could play what he just played there at that pace. You could probably count them on 1 or 2 hands. So he's in a very elite category. Now, the next exemplar I wanted to talk about is another hero of mine, this fellow Alex Honnold. Alex Honnold is a rock climber. I have a son who's a mountaineer and a rock climber, and he's introduced me into this world and dazzled me with his stories and his adventures. And through Eric, I discovered this gentleman, this young man. I think he's in his mid-30s now, Alex Honnold. He's from Sacramento, California. And he is noteworthy in that he climbed El Capitan, which I'll show you a picture of in a minute, without a rope. He climbed El Capitan without a rope. That is something that no mountain climber on the planet would even contemplate doing, a little less attempting. And there's a lot to say about that. But these pictures I'm showing you here are his ascent of El Cap. And here's him during a training. El Capitan is a rock face that's about 3,000 feet tall. It's like 3 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other. Not only that, it's a sheer granite face with very little places to rest. So it's exceedingly difficult. It's the headquarters of mountain climbing worldwide. And the greatest climbers from all over the world come to try to ascend El Capitan. By the way, it's almost impossible to describe, either in pictures or in words, the magnitude of this rock. It's only by standing next to it that you really get the feeling of its awesome size. The only other experience that kind of lends itself to being similar is when all of us here in Ventura County or anywhere in Southern California, when we go to the ocean and you just stand at the edge of the sand, look out on the ocean, and just you're overwhelmed by how large the ocean is. It's just, as far as the eye can see, there's water. It just seems like you have this childlike sense of awe in its presence. And you feel that way with El Capitan at Yosemite National Park. So Alex Honnold is not a daredevil. Alex is not a thrill seeker. You might think so, but it's not the case. He's a very deliberative human being. He's kind of an engineer type, actually. And he spent 10 years preparing himself to free solo climb this mountain. And it was put together in a documentary called Free Solo, which I highly recommend that you watch. But when you do watch it, bring a towel because your hands are going to sweat. You know that he does it. But it's important to know that he did over 1,000 free solo ascents on smaller mountains all over the Yosemite Valley and around the world in preparation for doing this larger climb. So it wasn't something that was done without deliberation. And the way he trained to do this climb was in mountain climbing, there's the idea of pitches. Again, like the bars in the music. And each pitch is a certain distance and takes you from point A to point B through a certain sequence of steps that are somewhat similar to each other. Some might be crack climbing, when you put your hands inside the cracks to hold yourself up. Others might be tension, where you only have just a little bit of foothold and a little bit of finger hold. And there's many different kind of types of stretches of rock climbing. And they're put together in pitches. And there's around 30 pitches to get to the top of this mountain. And just to give you a feeling for it, when Yosemite or El Capitan was first climbed, it took a group of a dozen climbers, the best in the world, over a month and a half of climbing to get to the top. And it was done in phases. They would climb a certain height and then come back down and then go back up again and keep going and then come back down again and back up again. And it took them over a month and a half. When Alex climbed in 2017 El Capitan without ropes, he did it in just under 4 hours. So I'm going to run a little video here giving you a sense of the intricate, step-by-step, little by little training necessary to accomplish a task of this magnitude. And it's a particular pitch called the Enduro Corner. So here we go.
I mean, to have the slabs and the boulder problem behind him is monumental.
Here's the Enduro, huh?
Yeah, this is the Enduro. I can't believe you guys actually can watch. Oh, I don't want to. I don't.
Yeah, that's kind of exposed right there.
Oh my god, it's so exposed. That arret move as he stepped around has got to be, I mean, that's like one of the most exposed moves like anyone on El Cap. You just step out and it all drops away.
Alex is having the best day of his life.
I don't know. Not me. I'm done. I'm done. Yeah, no, this is it. We don't need to do this again.
So his friend a group of climbers that were his friends essentially that were also great photographers recorded this what many people think is one of the greatest achievements in athletic history, and it was very, very difficult to film because they knew how dangerous it was, and if he should fall, they would be the ones recording it. It's a long story. There's a lot to say about this event, but the reason I'm bringing it up in regards to our little by little concept is that I wanted you to understand how he went about preparing to do this. He spent 2 years after doing 1,000 free solo climbs previously on lesser mountains. He spent 2 years training, and he wrote down every handhold, every foothold. Then he would, with these fellow climbers, would go into those pitches, and he would rehearse each pitch again and again and again and again with ropes, with protection, so that he could do it as if it were second nature to him. And the thing the superpower that this particular person has developed is very Yogan-like, is that he trained himself to stay calm in what other people would find dangerous situations. He says that he finds it more nerve-wracking to be on the freeway in a car than to be on the face of a mountain without a rope. And he's probably right, because he's in full control. And he's rehearsed every handhold, every foothold, and he's done it again and again and again so that he's comfortable. In the same way that you might be comfortable being on the freeway going 70 miles an hour with a car 10 feet in front of you on the 101. So the idea that's so amazing about this is that a human being, through self-discipline, can reach that level of concentration, that level of self-mastery, where they essentially have overcome a certain, they've mastered their fear through training. It's not something they're born with. What he did is he would take himself into a training regimen where he would do something just a little bit beyond his comfort level. Just a little bit. And he would work on it again and again. They call it projects. In climbing, they call them projects. So the climber will choose to climb something that they can't, at this particular point in time, perform. It's a little bit beyond their skill level or their range of ability. So they work on it, and they come back again and again and again. They work on just that one pitch, and they work on each handhold. He had a diary he kept where he recorded each and every handhold, each and every foothold in a diagram on sheets and sheets and sheets of paper. In the documentary, you get to see this. And you can see how the little by little principle was at work here, is he just broke it down into every little segment. But not only did he work on the technique, but he worked on his ability to overcome any natural sense of fear. And so some people thought that maybe he had an unusual brain, and he was born with some different mental capacity because his brain was different than other people's. And so they actually did brain scans of the guy, for heaven's sakes. And they found that he was perfectly normal. It's just that he had this capacity to stay calm in circumstances that the average person couldn't. And he made the point that he wasn't born that way. He trained himself to be that way. So for him to climb something that difficult was something well within his comfort range, in the same way that it's comfortable for you and I to drive on the 101 freeway. So I think what I'd like to do now is maybe open up just for a moment any questions or comments from our attendees, and then I think we're going to have a short break. Does that sound all right? Can we do it that way? Let me stop sharing the screen and open up for the group. Would anyone like to offer any thoughts or comments on what we've been talking about so far?
I have a comment.
Yes, go ahead, Edarmus.
I couldn't help but envy the time that young man had to practice, because that's what I would love to have, to be able to feel like I play half decent at the piano. And so I was, just I'm enchanted by the way that you're teaching this course. Really, it's incredible. Thank you.
Well, I think for all of us, what we're going to be working on little by little is you might say, the internal spiritual disciplines necessary to move forward and to make ourselves not only better students, but better servants of the human race. So learning to master one's fears is helpful. Mastering one's anxieties, one's worries, one's desires. All of these things are probably more difficult than climbing El Capitan. But how do you gain mastery over the mind? Little by little is the answer. It's little by little. Every day a little bit. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, one of the thoughts that came to mind is, in this little by little idea, and the idea that you brought up at the beginning of making Theosophy isn't necessary on the world stage. And it brings to mind the idea that we're eternal. And so maybe we can apply the idea of little by little to not just this one incarnation, but to the idea that we are an eternal pilgrim. And so that everything we do every single day is important, not just for our becoming of this particular personality or form, but that we become part of an army, so to speak, a band of heroes that can eventually lift up the whole of humanity, because that's what we're here to do, is to lift up matter, to lift up our humanity. And it seems that until we realize our eternal nature, the task seems very impossible at this point in time.
Yeah, what a beautiful point you're making. I love that expression, and I think it comes originally from Edward Bellamy in his Looking Backwards book. and it was picked up in Theosophy circles as well. But we are the comment is, we are right now living our immortal lives. It's not something into the future. It's not something it's right now. You are in the midst of your immortal life this moment. So are you growing little by little, or are you walking towards the sun, or are you walking away from the sun? Is the shadow shortening, or is the shadow lengthening? That's the issue. I think that the theosophical perspective is that each one of us is an immortal soul, just like you said, Laura. And from that standpoint, all that matters is that we take the next step forward. There's no rush, no need to rush here. Yeah, there's someone in the room that had wanted to make a comment. Let's go to you.
Hi, yes, it's Francine. What came to mind when I was watching him climb was how, as much as he originally had this vision of the goal of reaching the summit of that, that's not where he was as he was taking the next step and the next step and the next step. He was not thinking about the ultimate outcome. He was present with what was right in front of him. And I think when I recognize that, I realize we are evolving, whether we take a big step, a small step, an angry step, a happy step, we're going to evolve. We're going to reach whatever that ultimate goal is in some way or other. Whether, he made the climb or not, the ultimate goal would be the final outcome. How you take that next step is all that you've got.
Yeah.
Is that moment by moment step, and it took my breath away to imagine.
Yeah.
That's how we truly need to live our own lives. Is present moment. Moment.
That's such a good point you're making. Yeah. It actually, in that teeny little clip I showed you, one of his friends, it's one of the filmmakers, said he's having the best day of his life. It wasn't when it's over. No. It was the climb itself that was making it the best day of his life, because he was doing something he had trained and prepared himself to do for the better part of his adult life. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that I think the problem with thinking that we'll be happy when the journey is over is somewhat caught up in the one life doctrine, which unfortunately permeates our culture. I think in wiser cultures, ancient cultures, the journey was all there was. And traveling was the important thing. Maria, go ahead. You're muted still. I can't hear you.
Thank you. He didn't do it alone. He had a vast team behind him, including parents and family and colleagues who painstakingly trained with him on ropes, all of them ascending El Capitan with him as he trained. So this is a journey we certainly assist each other with all along the way.
Very observant. That's absolutely the case. And he, Alex Honnold was this incredibly shy young person. And the reason he got into free soloing wasn't because he was a daredevil. It was because he was too terrified to ask anyone to climb with him. He was too shy to ask any of the other climbers to belay him. So he had to figure out a way to practice climbing on his own. And from there, little by little, he kind of grew out of his shyness and made friends. But this climb, this monumental climb that he did, Maria, you're absolutely right. There were teams of climbers that would go and set up those pitches that we were talking about in advance. So all he'd have to do is, quickly descend down to that pitch, and then he'd work on it all day long. but someone had to set up the ropes and set up the conditions, because if you have 3,000 feet worth of climbing, right? Well, how do you get ropes down into the middle sections, for heaven's sake? You need help to do that. Just to carry all the ropes necessary to get down that low takes a team of climbers. So for 2 straight years, he had maybe 6 men that trained with him and worked on each and every single pitch. Yeah, go ahead, Elena.
No, audio works better now. Still echoing. Um, one thing that struck me is not just the courage and the determination that was obviously needed, but flexibility. Not
Yes.
only his body very flexible, but also, you have a goal and you think you're going to go straight up. But sometimes you need to go horizontally to find an easier way to go up. And I think that helps as well, because we tend to be very determined to go just one direction. And we forget we need to be flexible. We need to go along with the flow sometimes and make it work.
Yes. Beautiful point. Yeah. We need to follow the handholds that are available to us, and not. This is a little bit reminiscent of the problem of barreling ahead, kind of thoughtlessly. We have to be deliberative, and I think also we have to, to find out what the next step is. We have to turn inwards. We have to kind of consult our larger nature, our higher nature. And often what we discover is that the next step isn't straight ahead, it's to the left or to the right, just like you said. Laura, let's go with you, and then we'll take a break and give everyone a chance to get a glass of water and a little break from what we're doing. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, Elena points out the difference between having a vision and having a plan. That the vision allows us to be flexible. And then we talked about, Maria brought up, and you did, about the people that are around us and how they set up the conditions for us, just like he had the crew that set up the mountain. And as students of Theosophy, we must recognize that everyone around us, whether friend or enemy, helper or non-helper, is setting up the conditions around us that is to help us in our evolution. So rather than kicking at them or fighting against them or choosing what we like and don't like, accept all that comes to you as necessary, as the condition that you need to achieve the goal that you're aiming for, which is union with the self. So even your enemy is setting up the condition for you to help you on that path. And that's important to realize. And we don't do it alone, that we need the opposition as well as the aids and the help as well.
That's going to be a wonderful segue into some things that I wanted to talk about in the next hour. So, Maria, how do we go about taking a break? Isn't that on the agenda? We're not hearing you. You're muted, my dear.
Yeah, we'll just take a break for just close down our video and audio for about 10 minutes and then return.
Okay, so that would make it what, 11:20?
11:20.
Okay, 11:20 we'll resume.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, everybody. Okay. Okay. Judy, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay. I think we're going to start up here in just a moment.
All
Let
right.
me share my screen again and just let's see here. I've got a. Okay. Elena, I saw your note. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. Are we assembled? Can I get a hallelujah from somebody?
Hallelujah.
Okay. Okay. You know, well, we were talking about the step-by-step approach we were talking about knowing how to proceed. Sometimes you have to go sideways to go up, which Elena was talking about. I think that's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about next, which is that each one of us has a bit of a mystery to solve. I thought this picture of the rose kind of was a good example of it. I mean, each one of us has kind of created a knot, if you will. And it's our job, our individual job, to untie the knots that hold back all the potential that lies within our human nature. So each individual has their own road to walk in that regard. It's the same road as the rest of us are treading, but maybe experienced differently with slightly different challenges. But in a sense, the mystery of each individual life has to be unraveled by that individual. And we've kind of created a bit of a karmic web. So this idea of the mystery, I wanted to explore that just for a second. And just to prove to you that Tommy doesn't play just wild, crazy, fast stuff, he wrote a song called The Mystery, which is like 3 minutes long. I want you to hear. Okay, so here we go. Oh, and let me know, someone's going to need to let me know that they can hear it.
It's the mystery.
Can you hear that, Elena?
We can hear it.
Yes?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So it's probably before I want to launch into a story that's going to illustrate a point. But before I do, let me just say this. I think it's important that we recognize the fact that every single human being that we encounter, whether it be close to us, in family circles, in our neighborhoods, in our various gatherings and groups we participate in, or just the most casual connections, each and every single human being is struggling with something. Even people who pretend to have all their ducks in a row don't have all their ducks in a row. If they did, they'd be enlightened or achieve some level of enlightenment. So it's important to remember that everybody's struggling with something. And frankly, from a theosophical standpoint, if you're not struggling with something, you're not really trying. If you're that mountain climber, you're working on a pitch that you're struggling to climb. The whole object is to train oneself so that you can do something that's difficult. And this is the case in the spiritual life, we are told, in that each one of us are trying to master human nature, the whole of it, with this full range of virtues and vices. And hence, if we're really trying, if we're making an effort to try and improve and grow and evolve, and do remember that's the theosophical teaching, when consciousness reaches the human stage of this vast evolutionary process, then the progress is through self-induced and self-devised efforts. Nature will give instruction, but the individual must do the work. So each one of us in this quest for gaining self-mastery, we're left our own devices to do that. So in that regard, I think that this incredibly interesting story by Tolstoy will help to make an important point that's contributing to this self-renewal idea that we're talking about today. Okay? And please bear with me. I grabbed some imagery to try and support the story that's a little bit out of place. The story actually takes place in Russia in the 1800s. I didn't have a whole lot of pictures of Russia in the 1800s, so I just grabbed some imagery to kind of support the story. So the story goes like this. There was a couple of ranchers that lived in the countryside, and both of them raised horses. And the two ranchers were friends. They were actually very close friends. And they often talked about their work and the horses and their families together. And on one particular day, the rancher came over to visit and congratulated them on, how wonderful his herd looked and how things were going. And the response he got from his friend was rather strange. He said, "Well, thank you very much. That's nice of you to say that, but I really don't know if this is good or bad." And this response of not kind of celebrating in his good fortune was kind of strange to him. Well, it just so happened that same day, at the end of the day, one of the ranch hands mistakenly left the corral door open. And all of the horses that he'd been raising escaped out into the wilderness. Basically losing all that he'd worked for. And there were a vast wilderness in that part of the world, and the chances of his recovering the horses were slim to none. So the word got out about this setback and this problem, and back to the rancher. And the rancher came over to console his friend and said, "Oh, this is so terrible. I'm so sorry this happened to you. What can I do to help you? Maybe I can help you. I can give you a few of our horses to start over again." And his friend said to him again that same refrain, "I really don't know if this is good or bad. I don't know." And he was startled by that response, because nothing could have happened that could be worse for a rancher of horses. Well, it just so turned out that the whole herd of horses that had gone into the wilderness encountered a large group of wild horses, and they became, a herd together. And when the domesticated horses started to get hungry, they were looking to feed at their regular location back at the corral, and so began to wander back to the ranch, except this time with all of the wild horses in tow, essentially doubling the number of horses in the herd. And I have found this little video showing this return of the horses here. Just see what you think of that. See, they're all coming back. I was there when it happened. I got it on video. All right, herd just got bigger. So the rancher came back, and when he heard about this, that his herd had doubled and it was back in the corral and everything was back to normal. Well, not normal, but things were twice as good as before. The rancher came back to him and said, "This is incredible. What a wonderful turn of affairs. This is so great. I'm so happy for you. I was very, very worried. And I just wanted to congratulate you and let you know that I'm glad that you're going to be back on your feet. And my family wishes your family the best," and on and on. And his friend, yet again, made the same response that so befuddled him. He said, "Thank you very much. It's very sweet of you to say all of that. But you know what? I really don't know if it's good or bad. I really don't know." And he said, "Okay." And he went back to his ranch. Well, turns out the very next day, one of the rancher's sons was trying to break in one of the new horses, one of the wild horses that had joined the herd. And in so doing, he was thrown from the horse. Here's the best I could give you for being thrown from the horse without being too graphic. And severely broke his leg. Compound fracture in several places. And it looked like he probably might even have trouble recovering for quite a long time. So yet again, the rancher had heard about this turn of affairs and went back to commiserate with his friend. And he said, "Oh my gosh, I heard about your son being, breaking his leg. That's awful. I'm so sorry that happened. I hope he has a speedy recovery, but good grief, a compound fracture, that's terrible. I hope you have a good doctor." And he kind of, was consoling. And his friend that he was speaking to, his rancher friends, yet again, made the same response as he'd made before. He said, "I really don't know if this is good or bad. I'm not really sure. I just, I'm going to deal with it, but I don't know if it's good or bad." Well, the very next day, the Cossack army came on horseback through the village to collect all the young men that were over 18 and under the age of 25. Napoleon had invaded, and they needed every able-bodied young man to fight against Napoleon. Of course, at that particular point in time, Napoleon's armies were considered the best in the world. And as we know from history, Napoleon did not lose very often, particularly at the beginning of his building his empire. And so it was fairly well known in Russia at the time that to go in to join the army and to fight against Napoleon was basically a death wish. So when the commandant from the Cossack army said, I've come to collect your sons, well, he had only one son over 18, and that was the one who had broken his leg. And as a consequence, he was not able-bodied and could not go to fight in the wars against Napoleon. And of course, when his friend came over and heard this story, he got the same response as before. And this story, Tolstoy tells us, goes on and on and on and on the same way. So the moral of the story here, I think, is that the circumstances each one of us finds ourselves in, the knots that we're trying to untie, that's your lot in life. And it isn't wise to consider one thing good or bad. And I think someone else said this, maybe Laura earlier, is that basically karma is a teacher. The circumstances that you find yourself in, the challenges that you're dealing with, the pitch of the mountain you're trying to learn to climb, the bars of the song that are so difficult to play fast, that is your task before you. Gandhi's favorite Christian poem or prayer was lead kindly light, one step's enough for me. So whatever that one step is, that's the one that you need to take. And the little by little principle needs to be applied to that individual step. And it isn't to be seen as good or bad, unless we want to look at it from the standpoint of the soul, which is what we should do, and recognize that whatever challenge that we have is precisely what we need to take that next step forward towards self-mastery. Okay. Would anyone like to comment on that story and what I've said so far before I go into the next segment here? I'm going to switch gears and talk about the thought factor and achievement next. But before I do, let me, I'll just look to see over here without taking this off the screen. Judy, go ahead.
Well, this story that Tolstoy tells is also in Taoism, the Taoist farmer who has that kind of a detachment. And I would say it's a perfect example of vairaga, which very few of us are able to reach. Indifference to pleasure and pain, illusion conquered, truth alone perceived. Because, of course, most of us want pleasure and take pain very badly and take setbacks badly. You're crying because you didn't get the job and then you got a better job later, or you're unhappy because that person left you, but then later you find a better person. So unfortunately, detachment is a difficult lesson to learn, is maybe the most difficult step in the paramitas, but you have to have it, and this man certainly had it. So it's a great example to share. And of course, with Tolstoy and War and Peace, one of the great strategy of the Russian general was eventually to slash and burn and leave Napoleon nothing to conquer. And he didn't know if it would work, the old general, very close to the Tsar, but it did. And in the incredible TV series about it, I knew the sister of the actor who did it, the old general, when he hears the Russian hymn and the bells playing because Napoleon's left Moscow with his army starving and in shreds, he just falls on his face in front of the icon. He doesn't say, what a great strategy I had. He just thanks God. It's very dramatic. but he also had the detachment to do that. He didn't know if it would work, but it's all they could do because they did not have the army to face Napoleon. But later they, of course, went after him with small groups and partisan.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good example. Thank you.
Yeah. I really appreciate the connection with Vairagya, the detachment principle in the voice of the silence. That's a really great connection because that's the place that we're headed towards that's invulnerable to the distress of the world. And in the second, in the afternoon when we reconvene after lunchtime, I want to talk about the idea of building an inner life and building an inner sanctuary. That idea that's so prevalent in all the spiritual traditions, I think, is where we gain that strength to go through life's challenges as gracefully as possible. I think it's very important, and I think all of us, have been around the block that are in on this meeting today. Each one of us, I know many of you, we've all been through hard times before. We've had our difficulties, our challenges, and our setbacks and the like. And what we really want for our children and for our friends and for our colleagues is not, freedom from challenges and difficulties, because life is going to bring them whether you like it or not, because that's the nature of growth. If that sequoia tree is going to get to be 300 feet tall, it's going to have to endure droughts and fires. And the droughts and the fires participate in the strength of the tree. So same thing for us. The challenges and difficulties that we get through make us stronger if we see them from the standpoint of the soul. Idarmas, you wanted to say something, and then Marian, you next.
Yes, I'll be quick. You said something about you don't know if somebody else has said something similar to what Tolstoy was talking about, karma, good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Annie Besant. When I read in one of Annie Besant's books, where she talked about this, and that karma was only lessons that we need to learn and should not be seen as good or bad. And that really changed my whole perspective since then in my life. That made me that much more happy in my life, instead of that, and realizing that whatever comes my way, I have created and I need it. And so I should be thankful.
Yeah. Well, she's very wise, and that is the same lesson that I think we get in the Gita as well. It's kind of a theme in the spiritual traditions of mankind, and it's interesting that Tolstoy picked it up probably through the Christian faith, I suppose. In the case of Annie Besant, we have someone who's a Theosophical student for a lifetime that has the whole range of Theosophical ideas, which is to work with. Marian, you wanted to add something.
Yes, I love that story. And I wanted to ask, the class or your opinion of, realistically speaking, we know about Theosophy and karma and reincarnation, but we know in our own lives and so many others that we don't see, in other words, in the story that we listen to, we see a kind of a quick turnaround. I know that it's because it's teaching us lesson, so you have to create the story in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But the horses get out, and then the horses never come back in real life, and then your whole foundation of maybe your living goes down, and then maybe now you lose your house. Maybe the son dies because his leg got infected, and now so what do you tell people? See, so that's sort of the bigger picture, is reincarnation and karma, that perhaps this is a karmic lesson that goes your many, many years and lifetimes. What do you tell people? This is more about real life, is that the horses don't come back,
Well, if we trust in the law, if we trust that the universe is on the side of growth and in improvement, which it is, then when we see that the horses don't come back, as you put it, we're taking too small of a snapshot. The photograph's too small. We need to see the bigger picture. So maybe it's the case that the farmer switches from raising horses to raising vegetables and gains more sustainability for his family as a result. I mean, I think all of us could probably point to many different circumstances in our lives that on the surface and at the time seemed perfectly awful. You know, a car accident or a loss of a loved one or something. And that with time, we saw the wisdom of it. We saw the meaning of it. We saw a lesson in it and realized why it was we had to experience that. And sometimes, life's lessons are not easy to learn or joyful to learn, but they're necessary. And I think a theosophical approach is to say this, is that each difficulty that we encounter and struggle with is a part of a training to take on some greater duty down the road that's going to require more of you than you currently can muster. So each challenge and each difficulty is leading up to a larger one and a larger one, until at some point you join the ranks of the Mahatmas and you take responsibility for servicing the welfare of human evolution in its entirety. Think of the magnitude of that responsibility. So that's where we're headed, I think. Victoria, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, very quickly. So personally, I don't use the term detachment. I look at it as wisdom. I'm using evenness, wisdom of evenness, where you have no attachment to anything, but you don't have any aversion to anything either.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, my daughter called me, having to deal with certain issues, and I told her, I said, Michelle, I said, because I like what you just said about the bigger picture. And I said, Michelle, I said, you've created a vacuum with your life. You stopped growing. And anytime a lot of things hit you and come at you, different experiences in life like that, it's because we cease to grow. Because life needs to grow. It's innate within itself. And when we collapse it, we create those very knots that you were talking about earlier. And these knots are totally against being in harmonic balance or anything. And I explained, when you create a vacuum, it self-destructs. It exhausts itself because there's no new energy coming in. I said, and because it's innate within life to evolve. And that's just part of our makeup, is to reach that enlightened source or place that we are in actually right now, but we just don't know it. If we cease to grow, then those things are going to come at us from left and right and whatever it takes until we start to accept change. And not our aversion to change.
Yeah.
We're familiar and we're comfortable with the very things in our lives, and we don't want to do anything more.
Yeah.
You got a great job, you got a great mate, you got a great this, you got a great that. You don't want anything disturbed, but that's not life. So I think it's really important that we're honest with ourselves and look for that state of evenness and have no expectations. You know how they go, curiosity killed the cat. I always say expectations did.
Yeah, no, I think you're making some really important points. And I think that's a great way of kind of taking the metaphor of a knot and giving it a little bit more foundation. A knot is a lesson that's unlearned. So the lesson has to be given again and again and again until you pass the lesson. And hence a knot is very much that. It's the stubbornness not to learn or to reflect or to grow. Jim, we'll go with you, and then we'll jump back to what we're going to do next. Go ahead.
Yes. I think this is a continuation of the passage you read from Dante. It says, I do not ask to see the distance seen, one step enough for me.
Yep. Yep, that's it. That's from the same poem. Lead kindly light.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that very much. So for the next little bit of time, I want to talk about the idea of the thought factor and achievement, because I think in this theosophically, we know we've had the teaching that the way things change is from within without. Just changing, if let's say that you're an impatient person, you know, I will raise my hand, I'm one of those folks, you know, very, very impatient person. You could, you know, jump on a plane and go to China or India. It's not going to make the impatience go away. You're still an impatient person in India or in Ventura. If you want to fix that, it ain't going to happen by changing your location, right? So the teachings in all the traditions point to this idea that it's in the mind where we need to put the work in. Okay, so I have some passages from some of our great predecessors that I want to read to you guys. And this is from Emerson when he said, the key to every man is his thought. Sturdy and defying though he look, he has a helm which he obeys, which is the idea after which all his facts are classified. He can only be reformed by showing him a new idea, which commands his own. The life of man is a self-evolving circle, which from a ring imperceptibly small, rushes on all sides outward to new and larger circles, and that without end. So if we are to engage in the Jnana Yoga aspect of the spiritual life, which we should, Theosophy is encouraging us to blend all of the yogas together. Karma Yoga, the yoga of service, Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion and making things sacred, Jnana Yoga, the yoga of growing in the area of wisdom. Every single idea within the philosophy can be expanded, and almost infinitely, because essentially there's just one idea, and in Theosophy, all the ideas relate to each other. There's a radical unity in the philosophy. So not just do all the lessons of life and all the incremental steps in life connect one to the other, but also the entire universe and all of the philosophy, the divine wisdom that stands behind nature, is one unified system. And we can take whatever idea we have at the moment, which is a not, going back to what Victoria was saying. The current ideas and concepts of ourself, of what we think is real, what we think is important, all of those are, from one standpoint, knots. And if they're going to be untied, they have to be expanded and expanded and expanded until they're seen in one huge unified whole. And this is what I think Emerson's talking about. Now, George William Russell, an incredible mystic that is contemporary with HPB and Besant and Judge and the others, at the early parts of the modern Theosophical movement, made this point when he said, what a man thinks, that he is. That is the old secret. In this self-conception lies the secret of life, the way of escape and return. We have imagined ourselves into littleness, darkness, and feebleness. We must imagine ourselves into greatness. So remember, Helen Keller was the one who said, literature is my utopia. It is there that I am not disenfranchised. It's another way of saying that within the minds of man, within the imagination of our consciousness, we have the ability to establish an ideal. We can dream the dream of universal brotherhood. We can begin to envision it. We can envision mastering our own shortcomings. We can envision the civilization of the future. All of that is within the capacity of the human being, but it begins with ideas. And Theosophy is very much about ideas and growing ideas. Now, in regards to this idea of self-mastery of the mind, we have this guidance from Bhagavad Gita. When Arjuna, in despair, says to Krishna, "Oh Krishna, the mind is full of agitation, turbulent, strong, and obstinate. I believe the restraint of it to be as difficult as that of the wind." And then Krishna, speaking as the Logos in the cosmos, as the higher nature of all human beings, says, "Without doubt, O thou of mighty arms, the mind is restless and hard to restrain. But it may be restrained, O son of Kunti, by constant practice and the development of dispassion." And I found there was a correlation here from a commentary on the Gita that I thought was helpful here because it brought in the little by little element. In restraining the mind, both practice and renunciation are necessary. Whilst the mind cannot be subjugated all of a sudden, restraint is possible as a gradual process. So in the effort to get a handle on being the captains of our own ship, of being more intentional, of being more deliberate, to being a chooser, rather than being someone who does things out of habit or by convention. To be more awake. How about that? And to be more awake means to be aware of choices and options. I know one of the disciplines that some fellow students have undertaken in their spiritual efforts was to be more deliberative in their words. And the training could be something like, I'm going to think about what I'm going to say and the tone in which I say it before I utter anything. And I'm going to try to do that all day long. I mean, try that one out for size. For someone as talkative as me, it's practically impossible. But I actually know people who've for years have taken on that discipline of pausing before they speak and speaking deliberately. And I highly admire these people and can see that they become the types of people that when they speak, you listen, you pay attention to them because you know it's coming from the best part of themselves that they can generate at that time. So Krishna's not playing down the fact that this is going to be difficult. But it can be done and has been done. And it's something that one can get perpetually better at. And do notice too, that in addition to the practice component, the little by little is back to the dispassion idea. And where does dispassion come from? It comes from a philosophical understanding. That's where it comes from. You can't have some detachment from all the personal desires of the world and all the things that are not important unless you've seen clearly that what the real purposes of life are. If you think that the purpose of life is getting and spending, which Shakespeare mentioned in one of his plays, then you're destined for a life of high expectations, disappointments, new expectations, and this endless cycle of chasing pleasure and running away from pain. And the Mahatma, the great teacher, is one who's transcended that. And this principle of kind of putting effort and energy into trying to get the mind not just still and disciplined, but also growing the ideas one needs to live a life in a body, in the world. You know, we need ideas. We need big ideas. We need universal ideas. And this is what Theosophy and it's the tradition of all the great teachers of the past have admonished us to do, is to really look for universal ideas. Universal ideas. Remember, it was Plato who had made the point that every man should expend his chief thought and attention to the consideration of his first principles. Are they or are they not rightly laid down? And when he has sifted them, all the rest will follow. That's basically a diagram of being a philosopher, what Plato said right there. So our thoughts are very important. So the Buddha, echoing these same teachings in a new and different way, makes the point, as we've all heard before, all that we are is a result of what we have thought. All that we are is founded on our thoughts, informed of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain pursues him as the wheel of the wagon follows the hoof of the ox that draws it. All that we are is a result of what we have thought. All that we are is founded on our thoughts, informed of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with a pure thought, happiness pursues him like his own shadow that never leaves him. There's a wonderful writer who comes out of the Christian tradition, James Allen, who was very theosophical in his perspective. And he wrote a book called As a Man Thinketh, and basically elaborated the ideas of what we're talking about here, of expanding our ideas and expanding. You know, when we talk about ideas, one of the ideas, the big ones, is who am I, right? We're going to talk about that in after the lunch break. That idea needs to be expanded, and there's no limit to how far the concept of I can be expanded. And ideas like what's real, what's important, what's life for, what's the nature, how does the universe work? All of these ideas are ones that we hold in varying degrees and varying levels of clarity. And they are basically guiding us, and the substance of a human life are these ideas. So James Allen makes these points. All that a man achieves, all that he fails to achieve, is the direct result of his own thoughts. In a justly ordered universe, where loss of equipoise would mean total destruction, individual responsibility must be absolute. A man's weakness and strength, purity and impurity are his own, and not another man's. They are brought about by himself, and not by another. And they can only be altered by himself, never by another. His condition is his own, and not another man's. His suffering and his happiness are evolved from within. As he thinks, so he is. And as he continues to think, so he remains. So if we are to, again, grab the wheel of the boat, if we are going to be the captain of the ship, then we have to be the captains of our minds, captains of our thoughts. And you could add to that, I think, captains of our feelings. Because you can't really have an idea without a corresponding feeling to go with it. And evolving little by little to a place where we live more of an inspired life, where we feel energized to accomplish great things on behalf of our fellow man, to do things that are beneficial and help move life forward for not just ourselves, and maybe ultimately our personal self doesn't matter much anymore. And what's really all important is what can I do to move forward and benefit all of the life around me. That's one definition, by the way, of what it means to be human. I mean, if we want to elevate the idea, push it beyond just having a body and a name, raise the bar a bit. To be human means to be beneficial. That's what it means. To the degree that you're not beneficial is the degree in which you're non-human. It's one way to think of it. Why not set the bar higher? Why not set it more as a challenge? Can I be beneficial to each and every human being I encounter? Can I use each moment that I have to benefit others, to benefit life, to benefit the grand evolution of nature? These are theosophical ideas. I think that may be all the time we have before lunch. Maybe we could take one or two comments and then we'll break for lunch. Is that doing things the correct way, Maria?
Yes, that would be okay. We're over about 10 minutes. Some of us, do need to travel out a bit to get something to eat. So we do need to be back by 2.
Okay. So, would anyone like to make a quick comment on this thought factor and achievement idea? Victoria, please go ahead.
Yeah, since nobody else said anything. Your little by little, I was thinking in my mind this whole time, is our moment by moment. That we have an opportunity to change the direction of our lives. I just wanted to say that we're saying it was choosing one thing and one thing only. It was written by someone named Garab Dorje.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about using mindfulness, sustaining awareness, and knowing the difference between the stillness of your awareness and the movements of your mind. We start off by recognizing the mind and all that, and the thoughts and everything arising. Once we've got that down, then we move to the next step, which is finding that stillness within. And once you find that stillness within, the thoughts that we were having that were just wild and being guided by karmic winds and all that are now being guided by wisdom winds. So in the stillness, that's it. I just wanted to do that.
Victoria, that's very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. I appreciate your adding that. When we reconvene this afternoon at 2:00, we're going to talk about two things. The power of cycles and the whole arena of cycles and how to use them in regards to this, incremental, step by step, little by little, moment by moment approach that nature supports. And the other one is this concept of building an inner life, which is, I think, kind of what we're after here is to gain the strength that we need to take on life's challenges. So we'll talk about those things at this afternoon. Everyone have a good rest, get something to eat, and we'll reconvene at 2:00. It's okay? All right. Thank you, guys.